The desert had a way of testing men, not just their strength, but their soul. Jack Turner had been out there for nearly 3 months. His small drilling operation surrounded by nothing but red dust, broken stone, and a horizon that never seemed to get any closer. The bank had already warned him that this was his final chance. If he failed to find oil here, there would be no more funding, no more second chances, and no more dreams of building a future different from the one he'd grown up with. Every sunrise brought new hope, and every sunset chipped away at it a little more. On the 73rd day, the sound of the drill suddenly changed. It wasn't the usual harsh scraping of metal against stubborn rock. This was softer, heavier, like the earth itself was giving way. His crew froze, eyes wide, as dark liquid began to bubble to the surface. Thick, black, unmistakable. Oil. For a few seconds, time stood still, and then the desert exploded in cheers. Men shouted, hugged one another, and slapped Jack on the back, already celebrating the fortune they believed was about to be his. But Jack didn't join them. His eyes moved past the rising oil to the distant ridges on the horizon. He knew those hills. He had driven past the boundary markers more than once. Signs faded by sun and wind, but still visible enough to tell the truth. Apache land. A mistake in the paperwork. A flawed map from the county office. A line drawn a few miles off. It had all led him here, right onto ground that did not belong to him. His heart battled inside his chest. One call to the right investor and his life would change forever. His mother would never worry about medical bills again. He'd never turn a wrench for another man, yet something heavier than greed pressed down on him. His father's voice echoed in memory. Simple but unbreakable. A man can survive being poor but not being a thief. That night, Jack sat alone beside his truck. The sky painted with more stars than he had ever seen. The desert was silent now, as if waiting for his decision. By morning, he had made it. He ordered the crew to pack up the equipment. He personally sealed the well, covered the precious spot with dirt and stone, and wiped his coordinates clean. The men looked at him as though he had lost his mind, but Jack said nothing. He climbed into his truck, took one final look at the land he was leaving, and drove away, unaware that this choice would one day bring the Apache back to him in a way he could never imagine. 7 years can feel like a lifetime when you are trying to outrun a memory. Jack Turner had crossed state lines, changed towns, and buried himself in a quiet, ordinary life as a mechanic in a small, fading city. His hands that once gripped, drilling controls now turned rusty, bolts and greasy filters. The work was honest, tiring, and forgettable. Exactly the kind of life he believed he deserved after walking away from the oil. Some nights, when the world was silent, he wondered what had become of that land. He imagined another company might have moved in, sucked the earth dry and left it broken. Other nights, he hoped the desert had swallowed his secret forever. On one such morning, as pale light seeped through his dusty window, a knock echoed through his little house. At first he ignored it, thinking it was a neighbor or someone lost. Then the knock came again, steady and patient. Jack opened the door, squinting against the sunlight, and found 3 strangers standing on his steps. Their faces were calm, their posture straight, and their clothing carried patterns he recognized instantly. Apache. A ripple of shock ran through him. His mind jumped back to the well, the oil, the buried secret. For a second, he couldn't even find his voice. The oldest of the men stepped forward slightly, his eyes studying Jack as if reading the years that had passed through him. "You are the one who walked away," the man said quietly. "Not as an accusation, but as a simple fact." Jack swallowed. "I didn't take anything," he replied, his voice rough from lack of sleep and sudden fear. "That's all I cared about." Another man nodded. "You could have." "Many would have. You chose not to. Our elders speak of that place as land that was tested by greed and spared by a stranger." Jack felt a strange mixture of relief and confusion. "I never told anyone," he said. "I thought no one knew." "The land remembers," the elder answered. "And people talk. Your crew, local records, pieces of a story scattered in the wind. We gathered them over the years." Behind them, several dark vehicles waited quietly along the road, engines humming like a low breath. The man gestured toward them. "Come with us," he said. "It's time you saw what grew from the choice you made." Jack hesitated only for a moment. Then he grabbed his jacket and stepped forward. As he climbed into the back seat of the lead vehicle, his heart beat harder with every mile they traveled. Familiar desert shapes began to rise in the distance, silhouettes carved into his memory. Whatever waited for him beyond those hills, he knew one thing for certain. The secret he had buried 7 years ago had finally found its way back to him. The journey into the desert felt unreal, like traveling through a dream Jack had tried to forget. The familiar landscape rolled past the window in long, silent stretches of red earth and scattered brush. But something had changed. Roads that once barely existed were now smoothed and marked. In the distance, structures shimmered in the rising heat, and slow-moving machinery traced careful lines across the land. Jack leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as disbelief settled into his chest. This was not the abandoned, forgotten place he had left behind. When the vehicle finally stopped, the door opened to a world he could hardly recognize. Where his rig had once stood alone against the sky now rose a carefully designed operation, not just for oil, but for life. Solar panels spread like dark lakes across the ground. Wind turbines turned lazily in the distance. Water tanks gleamed in the sun, and nearby stood a school building, a medical clinic, and rows of new homes. Children's laughter floated on the breeze, light and free, a sound that sank deep into his heart. "This is what the land has given us," the elder said as Jack stepped out. "And it all began the day you chose to leave it untouched." They walked together toward a large structure built of stone and glass, decorated with ancient Apache symbols woven into the modern design. Inside waited men and women in both traditional clothing and professional attire. Engineers, teachers, elders, and young faces filled the hall, all turning toward Jack with calm, expectant eyes. He felt suddenly small, like a single grain of sand standing before the whole desert. On a wide table at the center lay a thick, carefully prepared folder. The elder slid it toward him and opened it. "You did not steal from us," he said. "You did not destroy our future for your present. Because of that, we decided that this future should also be yours." Inside were papers naming him a permanent partner in the tribe's energy trust, not as an owner of their land, but as a guardian of what it would become. A role, a responsibility, and a share of the success he had once walked away from without regret. "I don't deserve this," Jack whispered, his voice trembling. "You didn't expect it," the elder replied. "That is why you do." Outside, the sun started to sink, casting golden light over the same ground that had tested his heart 7 years earlier. Now, instead of a secret buried in shame, there stood a community built on respect. As Jack looked around at the faces, the homes, and the land alive with purpose, he understood something deeper than wealth. He hadn't just walked away from oil. He had walked toward legacy, and in doing so, he had become part of a story that would outlive them all.